Support for the podcast is brought to you today by Maria Sanders, Parent Coach. Maria is a licensed clinical social worker and PCI certified parent coach who has built upon her experience as a school social worker, teacher, and parent to share methods, approaches, and behaviors that work. She takes the time to learn about each individual family she works with and customizes a personal plan that brings the parent closer to their family goals. Maria works with families who have children over the age of 6 who are demonstrating challenging behaviors. Parent coaching is a dynamic, collaborative process. This process can help deepen your relationship with your child and end common battles such as homework, bedtime, and chores. It can reduce your stress level and help you find more joy and satisfaction in your role as a parent. Together, you will unravel your challenges, clearly articulate your goals, and develop strategies and a plan of action. Consultations with Maria Sanders are available via phone or video and in person for families local to the Montclair, New Jersey area. For more information, visit mariasandersparentcoach.com. Hello, parents and caregivers, and welcome back to Parenting Stuff I Wish I Knew Sooner and Want You to Know Now. I'm your host, Erica Desper, founder of the Center for Confident Parenting, and a mom who seems to learn everything I need to know just the hardest way possible. And well after I need to know it, I'm on a mission to help you avoid a similar journey. And to that end, I am rejoined again today by Maria Sanders, one of my favorite experts. Maria is a parent coach, a mom to 2 young girls, and she specializes in collaborative problem solving, also known as CPS, which is proven to reduce challenging behavior. We're all dealing with some of that. Teach kids the skills that they lack and build relationships with the adults in their lives. Her collaborative problem solving was originally developed for working with children with severe and or chronic challenging behaviors, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Maria, thank you for coming back and joining me again.
Thank you for having me. You know, this is my favorite topic.
I know, and we can talk a lot, so we'll try to keep it concise, but we probably won't. So in case our listeners don't know about you yet, and there is a previous episode they can go back and listen to, before we dig into our topic, tell us about yourself, your family, and how you came to do parent coaching.
Sure. So about myself, I am a licensed social worker, and my previous work was working in schools on the child study team. So I worked on that team as the therapist. I did IEPs, and I also ran social skill groups. I also spent a lot of years doing early intervention, both as a teacher and a social worker. Because I'm certified as a teacher, I got to work with the little ones there. And for about the past 8 years, I've had my private practice where I work with parents one-on-one. I'm located in northern New Jersey. That said, I work with parents everywhere virtually. And so you don't have to be in Montclair to get some support from me. And I work with parents of kids with challenging behaviors, as young as 3 years old, all the way up through really adulthood. And kids of all abilities and disabilities. So I do have experience with working with families with special needs. And so a lot of the work I do is to support those kinds of families. I also offer trainings to teachers and staff at schools in the same approach of collaborative problem solving. And so you asked how I got into this. I feel like sometimes I change the story. So if someone were to go back,
okay. We're allowed to rewrite our own stories.
If someone were to go back and hear the first episode, my story might be different. It's not because I'm lying. It's just because it's sort of, there's just different paths that sort of got me here. But the one I really...
And you survived sleep deprivation, so your memory might be.
Exactly. And I'm in my late 40s, so, you know, there's all that stuff going on too.
I hear you.
And so I guess... I don't know. I worked in schools, and then I took a couple years off to, you know, stay home with the kids. And I knew I wanted to go back to work, and I helped a friend. My friend reached out to me and said she needed some quote unquote behavioral help with her child who was getting out of bed, and there were some potty issues. And I helped her, and I was like, wow, whatever I just did, that was awesome, because I've never wanted to be a true therapist, even though that is my background. I didn't want to do therapy. And the way I helped her was very active. It was very much a partnership. It was very, I don't know, it was just a great, energizing, active experience. And I was like, whatever that was, I want to do that. So this was like 8 years ago. I Googled, what did I just do? And I came up with parent coaching. I found a master's level program, enrolled in that, just so that I can understand the difference between therapy and coaching,
Sure.
because there is a
There's a-
difference. And even though I have a background in therapy, I knew I wasn't going to be doing that. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't blurring the lines. And then I opened up my practice and landed here. And really, I found out about collaborative problem solving shortly after that. CPS is a research based approach rooted in the neurosciences. And so it really has to do with the brain and the way we think about, for the adults, it's the way we think about challenging behavior. Are we looking at it from the perspective that my child is doing this behavior on purpose,
Giving us a hard
or
time.
giving us a hard time? They know exactly how to push my buttons, all that kind of stuff. Or, and that's more of a conventional wisdom kind of approach. And then there's things that we do in response to their behavior when we have that mindset. And that's not a bad mindset. It's just not the mindset that I've sort of adopted with CPS.
Right.
The CPS mindset is this is more about skill. It's not about will.
Which
This is
more
not a
about having a
child.
hard time.
Yes, exactly. They're not giving me a hard time, even though it feels like it.
Sure.
They're having a hard time.
And I think a lot of times
for
it's a mix.
yeah, totally. And it's confusing. And in the heat of the moment, it's really hard to keep that mindset that my child, that this behavior is coming from a place of them struggling with certain skills to manage these difficulties.
Yep.
Right. And when we are in the heat of the moment, even me, who talks about this all day, every day,
Right?
and
You
believes
talk a good
in it
game.
wholeheartedly, there are times when I'm interacting with my own kids and I'm just a quote unquote mom, that it makes it really hard to kind of hang on to that philosophy.
Yep.
That said, when I can, it changes the dynamic tremendously for me and my experience and for my child's experience. And that's what we want, is to shift our mindset so that we can have just a better relationship with our kids, even when it's tough.
Beautiful. I'm pretty sure that is not the story you told the first time, because I feel like I just heard that for the first time ever. I've known you for a really long time, but I love that version of the story. And I also know you wouldn't lie.
Right.
So, I've been saying a lot lately, kids are not okay. I feel like this is still carryover from the stress of COVID, and some of the kids we work with on our team are, COVID babies. They sort of didn't even know socializing and going out into the world for the first couple of years. So right now, what are the most common challenges that families are needing help navigating? Like, what are common themes that you're seeing? Because I want people to know they're not alone.
Yeah. And in some ways, as far as the challenges, I don't necessarily see a huge difference.
Okay.
Yes, there's a difference in the amount of need there is.
That might be, yes, the difference that I'm seeing.
Right. Like, yes, I am busy, and there's not a huge difference in what parents are struggling with. Maybe there's more families that are seeing it, or parents are also tapped out, right? So it's the demands that are placed on us, especially like you mentioned during COVID, when we had to work from home and take care of our kids. Now, a lot of parents are still working at home, even though COVID is, really behind us. We're still managing a lot. And so the common themes, it's everything. There's screen time issues. And that's also something that's come up a lot in the news with a lot of research and the U.S. Surgeon General. And so it's been a topic that has now caught parents' attention, I think, in a different way than it has before. So that's coming up a lot. Just basic, executive functioning challenges, being able to stay organized and staying on top of their tasks and getting things done, and cooperation in the home, and there's sibling rivalry. There's, two parents not being on the same page. That happens a lot. I mean, it really runs a spectrum. Bedtime issues, bathroom, potty issues,
And now
homework,
that we're back to school, I was going to say homework issues are probably about
chores.
to creep up. We're recording
Yeah,
this during week
chores.
one, but
Commitment to sports. I just had a conversation with the mom the other day about the child's commitment to sports and then navigating that when there's birthday parties and other activities, and how do we kind of hold that expectation that they're going to stay committed to whatever they signed up for, and what does that conversation look like? So it really like mealtime. I just keep thinking like all the things
basically everything we have to get through every day can turn into
everything is
a
behavior.
behavior.
Everything is behavior.
Yes. Well, I wanted to start with parents. You are not alone. Whatever you're struggling with, there are other families struggling probably similarly, and of course, people that can help. Um, Today, we have obviously a specific topic we want to focus on. So, as everybody listening probably knows by now, I also work virtually with parents. We work with parents who are struggling to get their kids sleeping well or sleeping independently of them. And toilet training, whether they are, 2 and just getting started, or 5 and 6 and they're having still accidents at school. So in our work, because it is similar, I personally come across a lot of parents who really, really struggle to set and hold boundaries. And there can be the first thing I want to say, there can be lots of very valid reasons why it is hard or not appealing for us to set boundaries and then hold them and hold them and hold them and hold them while our kids press at us. So I wanted to dig in with you and your background into like why boundaries are important. I feel like we'll never do it if we don't understand the value of them and why they're necessary. And then like, how do we do that? How do we set them? What does that conversation look like? And what about when our kids push back, which I'm sure we'll talk about is expected because it's developmentally appropriate. All of that, we're going to dig into setting and holding boundaries. So first things first, can you help everyone understand why it is a necessary evil for parents to set and hold limits, whether it's screen time or language or whatever it might be, depending on your kid's age and their current button pushing behavior?
Yeah. They need it. It's part of their development that they need to know where the line is, right? It's almost like if you were on like, now, I don't mean open road as in a highway, but like literally there's no lanes and how would you know where to go? Exactly, right? You kind of need the lanes and the mile markers and maybe the literal metal guardrail to keep you in line. It doesn't mean it's oppressive or judgmental. It's just, this is the way we go. And I don't have to do it forcefully. I'm going to gently guide you. And I think that's an important perspective to take when thinking about boundaries, because I think the word boundaries, the word bound, you think of like, I'm bound, like I'm tied there. It does seem a bit, I don't know if the word oppressive is the right word, but forced,
Controlling.
right? Controlling, exactly. And so maybe shifting that thought to, is it a boundary or is it an expectation? Right? Just thinking, because if we're going to try to hold a boundary and we have the mindset that a boundary is something more controlling, that's where some of that struggle comes from, is my guess, right? Of like, well, I don't want to seem controlling. I don't want my kid to think I'm controlling. I don't want to be too controlling, or I'm not controlling enough. How do I control my kids?
Right. Yep.
Expectations are a little different.
Absolutely.
This is what I want for my child. This is what I expect, knowing that I may not get what I expect.
Right. Yeah, really, really good point. I love the open road analogy. I know in the past you've given a roller coaster analogy of like checking to make sure you're locked in tight, even when you already know that is there. But the road one is really good too. And then we have rules and structure for everything we encounter along the way. Like when you come to a 4-way stop, supposedly everyone knows the protocol for that. And when we follow it, everything goes smoothly. I've certainly encountered instances where people seem to want to make up their own rules there. And they're like overly courteous, like, no, you go first. No, you go first. And I'm like, there's a structure for this. Can we just follow it? Now we're wasting everybody's time. So I do think that is definitely something that parents can relate to, and framing it, more positively. I know with babies, this comes up with swaddling. Parents are like, "Oh, but if you wrapped me tight like that, it would feel like a straight jacket. I need to be free." And I'm like, "Yeah, I totally get that. But you're an adult who's operated in this big open world for, 30, 40 years. Babies are coming from this like tight,
Snug
safe,
environment.
cozy, right? So what would be restrictive to us feels cozy and safe to them. And so that's what we want to create. So that's another, if you have
That's
someone on the
great.
younger side, that could
Yeah.
be another analogy. There's also, we will talk about parenting baggage in a little bit, but I feel like there's a lot of talk, if you do hover on social media, about, helicopter parenting and just like being on top of your kid all
Mhm.
of the time. And I think maybe that feeds into some of parents wanting to be permissive, and not overly strict. So that leads me to the next question. What does the current research tell us about long-term outcomes of the various types and styles of parenting? And I know that there are categories, and I always forget what they are, but there's like permissive, authoritative, authoritarian. What are they, and how do kids turn out?
And then there's lawnmower
Yes.
and helicopter, and I think there's something called tiger parenting.
Yep.
I can't keep up with all of
Yeah.
those. I think the biggest thing to look out for is the relationship. I want to feel good as a parent with what I'm doing, and I want my child to walk away feeling good about what we are doing,
Mm.
right? And however you label that as similar or different or whatever, to me, that's one simple way to think about, how do I want my parenting to be? I want to feel good about how I've parented, and I want my child to walk away feeling really good about how that exchange went.
And I think that parents maybe think that by not setting a ton of limits or holding boundaries, I think they think that's going to have a really positive outcome. But when we're talking about limit testing and pushing your buttons, isn't it true that, and sorry, this was an unscheduled question, but I know you can handle it. I think parents think, well, if I set all these limits, my kid's just going to test me more. There's like more to test me on. But I think it actually works in reverse. When they already know what the limits are and the fact that you will hold them, we actually encounter less limit testing behavior. So we really are doing ourselves a favor, kind of front loading.
Yeah, I mean, I think that can be true. I think it's personality.
Mhm.
There's some kids who are just quote unquote fighters,
Mm,
right? Who are just always testing. And that's not a bad thing. Again, I think it has to do, and I keep talking about perspective, how we look at that. Does that, is that a horrible thing that our child is testing our boundaries? It might not feel good. At the same time, it's a really healthy thing for our kid to do, is to test why something is in place and to be curious about why something is in place.
yeah. Which leads me to my next question. I know there are certain ages where kids developmentally are more prone to pushing back, testing limits, pushing buttons. What are those ages? I mean, we're probably going to
All
see this all along the spectrum. All.
Well, I don't think it's fair to label like, oh, I mean, there are times when I'm working with a family who has like a 3 or 4 year old, and I talk about how 3 and 4 year olds are just learning to have that autonomy. They can now wash their own hands and brush their own teeth, and maybe they can start, they can pee in the potty. Maybe they can start wiping they can do a lot more for themselves. That's typically a time where you see a little bit of push, like, no, I do it. I can do it. I don't need your help.
Yep.
I'm 4 now, right? Like, I'm a
Yep.
big kid now. And so, yes, that's typical. That doesn't mean that at 5, all that's done, or at 6, because there's things about the environment, who else is in the home, what the expectations are. You come to the tween years, there's a lot of pushback there. I'm now a teenager. All my friends are walking to Starbucks. My friend has a phone, this thing. They're all going to the mall. They're going to the movies. They're whatever, this sleepover. Even older, driving and parties, and there's pushback and there's pushback. So I don't think there's maybe psychologists and researchers will identify certain periods of time. And like I mentioned, 3 and 4 years old, I see that a
The jump
lot.
from 2 to 3 tends to be if parents
Yeah,
often get blindsided that their 2-year-old
right.
who wanted to please
And
them
that those
now
early
wants to
teen
push their
years,
buttons.
yeah, and the early teen years and even the later teen years when, they're just about to leave the house. 17, 18 years old, they're about to leave for college. They feel like they're an adult. And if they're 18 and living at home, they are an adult. And so that's a weird dynamic or difficult dynamic also. So I just think it's all ages.
Yep. Good point.
Sorry.
So, well, that means this is very timely because whoever is listening, wherever you are along your parenting journey, you're probably going to need this information. So if this is just part of the gig for parents and kids, we know kids are going to test. We understand that boundaries are important. They keep us, safe. Let's get into some of the reasons why it can be just so hard for parents to set and hold boundaries, because some of the challenge might be just not knowing how valuable boundaries are. But I'm guessing that most everyone listening gets that concept. And they're like, yeah, but how do I? But how? And like, what about when they ask me for the 25th time, what am I supposed to do there? So like I said, I think there's a lot of valid reasons why we might struggle. I find that a parent's own childhood can be a reason for what I would think of as maybe permissive parenting.
Mhm.
So some parents maybe have abuse in their backgrounds or trauma. Their parents were overly strict, and that might lead them to want to do, the complete opposite. Is that something you find that our own childhood / baggage can factor in or does factor into our parenting choices and styles?
Yeah, and it's confusing, right? Because if you grew up in a home that was very permissive, you might say, I want the opposite
Mhm.
of that. That was too permissive. I didn't appreciate that. I wish my parents had more expectations for me and held tighter boundaries and just, expected more from me. And so I'm going to do things differently. But then, we second guess ourselves a lot. We don't feel
Right.
confident parenting, right? We don't feel confident in our decision making because we're not so familiar with that. So we're trying on something new that doesn't really feel right, but we think we've got to do differently. Or on the flip side, I was parented, really, my parents were super strict, super strict. I want to be more lackadaisical. I want my child to have free spirit and be able to, act on their own will and all of that. And that also doesn't feel good because the minute it goes haywire, we're like, oh, well, then I need to go unconsciously. This often happens. We're not necessarily aware of this, but unconsciously we're like, oh, I'm going to revert back to that strict parenting because it's what I know.
Right.
So whichever is what we grew up with, it's what we know. And so in those times of stress, we end up reverting back because we can't think more creatively when we're under stress. And so we go to what we know, which is not necessarily the best fit or really in line with what we want. But in those stressful situations, we don't have access to that creative part of our brain that says, how else can I handle this? How do I really want to handle it? Is there a balance?
And that's where something like CPS can be sort of a framework for parents of what kind of prepping them for those heat of the moment decisions. Okay, so our own background can feed into it. I hear a lot because I do work with parents who have neurodivergent kids that we're just trying to avoid meltdowns. We're trying to avoid like just total, it takes over the whole family life for the evening. Every kid's meltdowns, if we're going to use that word, look different. Sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's physical aggression. I think that many parents are sort of giving into things because their kids either wear them down or they just have really big, intense reactions to limits. And we've all had that feeling of like, I know this maybe isn't the right thing to do long term, but in this moment, I just want to let you do whatever you want to do because it'll keep the peace for now. What would you say to that?
I agree with that approach, actually. And so it is okay to kind of quote unquote, give in to avoid a meltdown, as long as a couple of things, as long as it is our choice that we're not kind of bullied into that corner, right? A lot of what I talk about is being proactive, trying to get ahead of a situation. So if I know that in my household, neurodivergent or not, wherever you land, there could be a ton of meltdowns. I've known plenty of
In a
families
given day
where there
or
is
hour.
not diagnosis and there yet or ever, and there are some significant behavioral challenges. If I know that I set this expectation for my child, that there's going to be a meltdown, and I proactively make a decision to quote unquote let it go, that is 100% in my book appropriate.
Okay.
Because sometimes there are a ton of challenges and we need to just simmer things down.
We have to decide if that's a battle we want to wage.
And really deciding, is this the right time to kind of engage with my child? Is this the right place to engage with my child? Am I in the right state of mind to engage with my child? And if not, if it's not the right time for my child or for me or the right place, let it go for now. But here's the caveat.
Yes.
We have to follow up.
Because I love the permission, but I know
Yes,
I have a kid.
okay.
Very early on, he learned what the word precedent meant, because even at like the young age of 2, he was pretty verbal. He would say something like, "Hey, remember the last time we were here? We got ice cream after?" And I
Right.
was like, that was a year ago. We've been to this place exactly once. How in the world? It's like if you do something one time, that's the law, right? And now we know he has autism, and so it's probably that rigid thinking.
Right.
But that's why I'm always afraid to give in. I'm like, what is this going to do to us later?
And that's why that caveat is
So yes,
important.
give us the
We
caveat.
sort of let it go for the moment,
Right.
just for that initial moment of time. Like I said, because either the parent or the child are not in the right state of mind, or it's not the right place, time and place, right? At a later point, shortly after, when everyone is calm and sort of outside of that heat of the moment, that's the time to reconnect and say, hey, remember when we went to the farm and you had a difficult time when I said we couldn't have ice cream today? Because the expectation was, oh, well, when we go to the farm, there's ice cream, right?
Little did I know that was the expectation, but yes, let's
Right.
say that.
Right. And he has a meltdown, and let's say you gave in. Whether you gave in or you didn't go in, it seemed like you had a tough time when I had said there was no ice cream today at the farm. Let's figure this out together. That's where the collaborative problem solving happens. And so that's the time to then kind of restate your expectations and kind of align with your child what the boundaries or expectations are around our trips to the farm.
Right.
And so one of our choices in collaborative problem solving, we have 3 choices. One of them is to let it go for the moment. And in houses where there is a whole lot of escalation, I recommend to families, let almost everything go. As long as it's not a safety issue, really just let it go. And then start focusing on, let's say there's 10 things that are challenging. I know that's a silly number, but whatever. Let's say there's 10 things and you let all 10 of them go. And maybe there's a couple that you enforce because of X reason or Y reason. And again, enforcing something is also okay. Little by little, you're going to start chipping away. Number 1, we're going to start working on the expectation at the farm. You work collaboratively with your child to figure out, what are we going to do in that situation? What's hard for you? And what's my expectation? Yada, yada. And then we work on number 2. And so it doesn't mean we're letting it go forever.
Right. That's the
It just means we're going to pick a
That
time and a place that's going to be better for us to work together. And there's different kind of things that come out of, there's different things that we're working on in essence, if we're letting it go. You know, I talk a lot about neurocognitive thinking skills, things like flexibility, frustration tolerance, and problem solving. When we let it go, we're not working on building those things. And that's okay. What we are working on is reducing that challenging behavior in the moment. And that's okay. Later, when we're working collaboratively, that's when the skill play comes in. That's when we can start building those skills. It doesn't always need to happen in that moment.
Okay, excellent. I love giving parents permission to let things go when they need to. All right, so as a parent, I am a fan of walking through real life examples and getting scripts that I can recall later. So let's try to do that, and let's pretend I have a teenager who likes to push buttons with respect to his phone time, but we're not actually pretending. I do. So let's say the expectation is, you can be on whatever the screen is for X amount of time. We've already had all the conversations in advance of expectations and such and such. And then, of course, we get to the end of the time, maybe he even has a visual timer so that he's not surprised that he's almost out of time. And then maybe I give him a reminder, like, let's say I'm doing all the things and we still get to the end. And he's either mildly like, well, I just want to finish this. I just want to finish what I'm doing. As a parent, modern games are a nightmare. Like when I played video games as a kid, there were levels. You went from left to right, and a level took a certain amount of time. And then there was a logical place where you could stop. And now I feel like we don't have that. So when he says, I need to finish this, I'm like, what finish? There is no finish. This could go on for forever. So I think that's a common thing if we're talking about video games or scrolling. He'll say, I just need to finish. I'm like, but there's no end to the scrolling. You just have to decide that you're done, because there'll always be more content, refreshing. So let's say he says he wants to finish and I remind him of all things, and now we're at an impasse. And let's say I don't decide to let it go in the moment. Maybe we've already done that and we've already repeated all the expectations. What's my move there if I don't want to go with option one and let it go?
Okay, so you could enforce if we choose to impose our will in that situation. That would look like, oftentimes, that looks like the use of rewards or consequences, bribes and threats. Hey, kiddo, if you get off the device, I'll buy you ice cream. If you don't get off the device, you're not getting dessert tonight, right? That is an option. There's a time and a place for that, and we want to be mindful of why we're choosing that option. I don't want to go too deep into it, but there's different, if we're doing that, what we're trying to do is just get our expectations met.
Right.
The likelihood is if we take that approach, we're going to see an increase in challenging behavior. And so we have to make a choice. And in that situation, we're not working on any of those neurocognitive thinking skills. And oftentimes that approach of imposing our will and using rewards and consequences creates a rupture.
Yep.
It's a battle. It's a tug of war between the parent and the child. And so we want to be mindful, is that what I want? If it's what you want, not a problem. You go with that. Or you go with that other option of, I'm going to let it go and let him finish. And then what that would mean is then at a later point, maybe that same night, he's older, so he could handle, he can handle long time in between. Younger kids, you want to have the conversation pretty soon because they may forget.
Right.
But sometime after, could be the next day or the weekend, you want to have that conversation, that collaborative conversation where you really lean in with curiosity, right? We can be really judgmental and say, he already knows the rules. He should be doing better. He should have just he doesn't get it. I've already threatened him a ton. What do I do? We want to lean in on that curiosity and say, he does know the rules. He does know the expectation. I wonder why it's still difficult for him to hop off that device at the expected time. And so we want to think that first, and then we want to have that conversation with our child and say,
So this
hey,
is the
kiddo.
third option. So there's let it
Yeah,
go,
this is
enforce your will.
you said you didn't want to let it go. So
Right.
I'm giving you two others. You
Okay.
can enforce your will,
Right.
and that's still an option for us parents. Again, it's being proactive in deciding if my kid gives me pushback when it's time to log off, how am I going to handle this?
Right.
Am I going to go with the imposing the will option?
Mhm.
Am I going to let it go for now? It's
Mhm.
not a long-term solution. Or am I going to work collaboratively with my
Okay.
child? So let's say you either did, I let it go, and now I'm at the point where I want to work collaboratively, or you did whatever, you're working together. You start out with really trying to seek to understand what's going on
Mhm.
with your child. Help me understand. It seemed like it was difficult for you last night to turn off your device at 9 o'clock, like we had talked about. Tell me what's going on. What
Mhm.
might be something he would say?
He would say, well, because I never want to get off my device. If it were up to me, I'd be on it 24/7, and I didn't make these stupid rules in the first place.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is you really like playing, and if it was your choice, you'd never get off.
Yes,
Get off the device. Can you tell me what is it about being on your device that you really like?
Well, I'm worried that I'm going to miss something. All my friends, their parents have no rules. They have TVs and phones in their room, and they can keep them all night long, and they talk all night without me, and you make me put my phone away. And I'm missing out on just everything.
Yeah, that's got to be really hard to have to log off and know because everybody else is on all night. Um, that's got to be really hard to
And I'm
know that.
laughing, but we know that's what kids think
Right.
and say,
I
right?
know. I know. And we also know that it's likely not true.
Likely not
But
true.
we're not going to battle that.
Right. That's what I
That's
wanted to
not
point
my
out. I
issue,
love that
right?
you're just sort of reflecting back. You're not questioning
That's one of the tools is that
fallacy of
reflective
that logic.
listening. Exactly. It's reflective listening. So, and a lot of empathy. I
Mhm.
get that. That must be really hard to have to log off and know that you're missing out on things. That's really hard to miss out on all the fun that your friends are having and the chatter and whatever. I get that. Is there anything else that's difficult about logging off?
Well, it just feels really exciting when I'm on. And then I know that
Okay.
everything I have to do after that is boring. Like, take a shower and lay out my clothes for the next day and try to fall asleep, which takes forever. And
Hmm.
I just want to
So
have
do you
fun.
think some of it is, I heard you saying, I'm going to miss out. And then some of it is also, I don't want to do the other stuff that's like
Yep.
not as fun as being on my
Yeah.
device.
I mean, if I
Yeah.
stay on long enough, I'll just fall asleep, right? Why do
Right.
I have to do all the things?
Yeah. I totally get that. So it sounds like there's two main things. One is, you know, the fear of FOMO, fear of
Mhm.
missing out. And the other thing is not wanting to do the other tasks. Now, to try to keep this short, because we could really dive into the other
Right. Well, and
tasks,
I think
right?
this is good because
What's,
it shows a parent how it would work working with you as well, which
yeah.
is helpful insight to have.
And that would be a separate conversation. Like
Right.
if the child is not showering and not completing homework and not doing any other chores, those are actually three other conversations to have, which
Right.
seems like really exhausting.
Right.
And I know this is going to seem like a long conversation. They can be long, they can be short, they can be super, it becomes your own language. Like in
Right.
the beginning, you don't know how to really talk the talk. And so you're like fumbling, or maybe you're saying too little because you don't really know. But as you become more familiar, you find a way to make it your own. So what I hear you saying is it's two things, the FOMO, and there are some activities you don't want to do, so you'd rather be doing your devices. I get that. And
Mm.
at the same time, and this is where our sort of boundary or expectation comes in, and at the same time, what's important to us as your parents is that, and then we can insert anything, is it
Right.
related to health, learning,
Sleep.
safety,
Mhm.
or the impact it has on other people?
Right.
Health. What's important to us is that you're off by 9 so that your brain has some time to chill out before you get to bed and you can get a good night's sleep. Is it about learning? What's important to me is that you're able to log off so that you can finish your homework. Whatever it is, short and sweet.
Yep.
We tend to talk a lot as
Yes.
parents.
Oh
So we want
man.
to just it. And
That's
that's
one
why
of
I'm
my
saying
downfalls. Lots of
we want to be
words.
proactive. We want to think ahead of time. What is important to me? Why do I even have this expectation slash boundary?
Yeah.
Is it reasonable? Have I ever made it clear to my child? And you're saying maybe in some cases, some kids have it very clearly laid out, but we just want to check in and like, why do I have this? Is it reasonable? You know, just checking in with ourselves. You never know. And
Yeah.
we can always adjust our expectations. And then after we state our expectation, we want to invite our child to brainstorm solutions
This
of
is
how
really
we can make
powerful
this
with my kid.
a win-win. We don't want our child to be the loser.
Right.
We don't want to be the loser, that's for sure. And what I was talking about before is I want us all to walk out of there feeling really good. So kiddo, I don't want you to miss out on things with your friends. Let's say that's the primary reason,
Right.
because this will take longer if we
Sure.
dive into the other thing. I don't want you to have to miss out on time with your friends. I love your friends. I love that you get to hang out with them. I don't want to take that away from you. At the same time, it's really important to us that you're able to disconnect an hour before bedtime so that you can get a good night's sleep. And so, kiddo, I'm wondering what ideas you have so that you can still hang with your friends and really not miss out and still get a good night's sleep. I'm not saying this conversation is going to go well. Your kid may be like, well, duh. I just will continue playing so that I don't miss out. And trust me, I'll get a good night's sleep. I don't need sleep.
Right.
None of my other friends need sleep.
But this is going to take time and practice.
That's possible. And in our sessions, we would work that out. But we start brainstorming ideas. Well, Mom, what if I can start playing earlier so that I'm done earlier?
Right.
Okay, that's an idea. I'm not going to call it a good idea or a bad idea. We're just going to put ideas on the table.
Yeah.
And then we're going to work through those ideas to see if they work for both the child and the adult.
Right.
And just because we do this does not mean that we're going to pick a solution that necessarily works. But we are on that path of doing this together.
Right.
This
now
is
you're
not
on the same
me
side of the problem.
enforcing the plan.
Right.
Because if I make a decision about how things go, it's probably not going to go well. And if I only let my child decide how things are going to go, it's not going to go well for me. We really have to work in that partnership and say, I've got your back here. I want you to feel good about whatever decision we make. And I want to feel good about the decision we make too. And so we've got to work together to figure this out.
Yeah.
And that's really that collaborative problem solving. And so whether you go with that enforcing your will or letting it go, neither of those are long-term solutions. Neither of those are ways to help build those neurocognitive thinking skills.
And that's where we're getting stuck and seeing an increase in behaviors versus.
Yes. And neither of those are changing anything. We're actually not focused on behavior. I mean, parents are, yes, for sure. But the behavior is a result of some lagging skills. And so our focus really actually needs to be on building the skills, because if the child has the skills to meet that expectation, we're often not going to see that challenging behavior.
Right. And so in our son, for example, the lagging skill might be struggling with transitions because of his ASD diagnosis. So we might do something like, what if there's something really fun to look forward to when you log off? Maybe when he was younger, we'd snuggle up with a book. That's not going to work anymore. But at his current age, he might shift to listening to one of his favorite podcasts. So I'm happy because his eyes are off the screen. He's preparing his brain and his body for sleep. He's happy because he's still doing something that, really appeals to him. And what I also hear you saying, to tie this back to the beginning, if boundary testing is mostly about kids seeking autonomy, whether they're going from 2 to 3 or 12 to 13, this speaks to that, right? You're not saying, "Ooh, force my will. This is the expectation. You should know it by now." You're saying, like, let's figure this out together. What are your ideas? So now they're feeling more autonomous, and hence the result is going to be better. So again, we're getting to the root behind the behavior versus just addressing this.
For an adult to say to a child, "Hey, I'm wondering what ideas you have to solve this challenging, tricky situation."
Yeah.
Again, not necessarily consciously, but the kid's going to be like, "Wait, you're asking me?"
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Imagine being 5
you
and
get
being
a little
asked,
bit of like
what ideas do you
street
have
cred with your kids, I think, when
Yeah.
And I know I'll say
to let them know, like, starting out with that curiosity. We often as parents start out, here, we have something to talk about,
Right.
right?
Lots of words.
And the kid's already off.
Tuned out.
Like they're not listening. Here goes another lecture by my parent, right?
Yep.
Whereas we start off saying, help me understand what's going on.
Yeah.
It seems like this is tough for you.
Mhm.
Fill me in. Then like that love and that empathy and that curiosity goes a long way. And when we say, this is what I hear you saying, the child feels seen and they feel heard. And all of this is helping to build that autonomy and that intrinsic motivation of like,
Mhm.
we're going to do this and I can do this and I have great ideas, and
Yeah.
all of that
I
is
love
what we
that.
want
And
for our
that,
kids.
unlike where we said it's not changing anything, that's setting you up in a slightly better place for the next time, whether it's the same behavior, a different behavior. Now we're like a step ahead in terms of repeating this whole collaborative
Right.
process.
For two reasons. One, because with every conversation, we're actually changing the neural pathways in the brain. And so we're building more skills, which means the next time our child's going to have a better like ability to have a conversation, to trust that conversation, trust the parent, and handle those difficult situations.
Beautiful. I wanted to just briefly circle back to two things you said, although they might have just gone out of my mind because I'm also in my 40s and lost some brain cells to sleep deprivation. I love coming from a place of curiosity. And I just wanted to give an example and also asking yourself as the parent, is that like, why do I even have this boundary? Is it reasonable? Is it necessary? Because we get stuck in ruts. So like, to use the video games again as an example, I will see him playing when he's been told he's allowed to play. And I start to get that itchy anxiety, like want to claw my skin off because I'm like, how long is this going to last? You know, whatever. But I found lately, if I just say to him simply like, hey, do you have your eye on the time? And what's your plan for when you're going to wrap this up? Often what I find out is because we've gone over this so many times, he does already have a plan in mind. I'm just not aware of it, right? So if I were to come at that situation not from a place of curiosity and just assuming, oh, he's just going to take advantage of this and do it forever until I enforce my will on him, the end result would be completely different. Or I'll say like, hey, bud, I feel like you've been on there longer than what we had planned. How many more minutes do you think you need to feel like you're finished? And he'll often choose something very reasonable. And to me, that's a win.
Right.
Now, I don't think that would work if you had not been using this type of process, up to that point. But I just think, or he'll be like, I just got on 5 minutes ago, but I wasn't paying attention. And
if you didn't ask, you didn't know, and you would have made that assumption. Yeah.
Or he's frustrated. He's like, this stupid game, it has, so many, the graphics are so heavy and blah, blah, blah. It took the full length of my turn just to get to the starting point, which is important. That's frustrating as a parent. If I need to get on Zoom and it doesn't update and blah, 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 like we all experience that. So if I give him a chance to say that, I'll be like, okay, well, that didn't count for your turn. So I love all of that. And I just wanted to give, real life examples. Obviously, your kid. So if your kid's going to say, I need 3 more hours to feel finished, that strategy is probably not going to work well for you.
Curiosity about that. Why do you think you need 3 hours?
Right.
Help me understand. So talk about real life examples. And it was almost like kismet that you had said, we're going to talk about boundaries and expectations, because I mentioned social media being in the news. My kids I was part of a panel this summer about experts talking about social media and yada, yada. And I volunteered my kids. I ended up getting their permission, but I volunteered my kids and it ended up being their friends to go on a phone fast for a week. It was on NBC, and they went on a phone fast for a full week, no phones, no devices, just to the news person, reporter came to my house and did an interview before they had their phones taken away and then upon return. Yeah. And so the kids talked a lot about what their concerns were, what their fears were, what their thoughts would be, how would it feel? And then the post of like, what was that like? And so my daughters and I had spoken a number of times about what was positive about that, what was difficult, whatever. And my husband and I had spoken about kind of backtracking some of the things that we had put in place. And I think that's really hard for parents to be like, but I already allowed my child to have access to blank. But now I'm realizing that's not a good idea. I have to pull back.
Especially
And
if they're on the spectrum and they have that rigid thinking and they feel like
yeah,
the precedent has been set and this is completely unfair.
totally. And that presents different kinds of challenges and maybe different ways that I would handle it. My girls are not. And so is, over dinner last night. So my husband and I got on the same page. We really talked it out, but I had to wrestle myself and say, why do I want to make these changes? So the two changes we wanted to make is they both have phones and they have iPads. And I was like, they don't need to have both. iPads, I really want those saved for car rides longer than 3 hours or long flights, right? But day to day, they don't need both. And they both have YouTube on their phone. And I said, I didn't realize that was social media and I want it off. And so part of me was like, do I want to pull those things because I'm the parent coach and people are looking at me and they have these expectations.
And now you're on the news.
Right. Or is it really something I believe in? Like, checking in with ourselves. So I really spent some time checking in with myself, chatting with my husband about what our ideas and thoughts and plans were. And I was nervous because the last thing any parent wants is their child to flip out at dinner or anywhere. Right. And so I was hesitant, and my husband and I hadn't actually decided when we were going to have this chat, but it came out of my mouth over dinner. Like, I don't know what we're talking about. So girls,
out of the bag.
But I led with that curiosity. Help me understand how we did that social media experiment thing. How are you feeling about it now? What are some things that you think that we need to change? And just really getting their input about their experience. We then shared what was important to us. And then we kind of worked towards a collaborative solution. And I was nervous the whole time. And my kids, they definitely escalated a little bit, but I kept leaning in on that empathy. I don't want you, I love that you get creative on Minecraft. I love that you get to play games on Roblox with your friends who don't live here that you don't ever get to see. I get that. And I don't really want to take that away. Right. And so when it came time to air their concerns, I do feel like they felt really heard. And I got to share my piece and they got to share theirs, which means I get to share mine. And we actually didn't come up with a full resolution for all the pieces involved. Yes, YouTube's coming off and the iPads are away, but the Roblox and there were a couple pieces. And I was like, girls, this is not a rush thing. Mom and dad,
of the conversation,
we need to figure this out. I definitely hear you. I'm taking all of that into consideration and we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out together. Whew, I was like, it was such a big conversation that I was so anxious about. And I think that's what parents struggle with is like, I'm afraid that my kid's going to escalate. I don't want them to hate me.
Yep.
I want to have a good relationship with my kids.
I want to be the bad guy. Well, and getting parents on the same page is a whole nother topic for another day, but that's important to acknowledge at least.
Right. But it's a hard thing. So I just want parents to know, like, yes, this is a hard thing to have these kinds of conversations. Sometimes it does go well. And so one of the ways that we could hedge our bets to make it go well is be proactive in doing the work before the conversation and picking the right time and place for that to happen.
Beautiful. Is there anything I know there's no hard and fast rules. Every kiddo is different. Every family is different, all the things, but are there any things we want to not say or do in these heat of the moment scenarios that are just going to send things like for a tailspin?
I mean, I know there's so many. And right now I'm like, wait, what? I mean,
how about because I said so?
Because beautiful. And because I said so, I think when we try to prove that we're right, the word discipline means to teach. And so we want to just remember that we want to operate in that way of like, it's not about like the because I said so. It really should come from this place of like, I want my child to be a better person or a great person, whatever it is. Like, I don't want to say better, like they're not good enough, but like, I want to guide them. I want to teach them. I want to be that rail on the road and those markers to guide them in the right direction. And how can I do that in a way that they're going to learn? They're not going to learn if I say, because I said so, or forget it. Now everything's taken away. Or I start that, well, everybody's, everyone has a phone. No, they don't. Yes, they do. No, they don't. That tit for tat, that's a definite deal breaker. It's not going to work. And you're just trying to one up your child. I know that happens. So I'm not trying to be judgmental. I just know that happens, that, the child tries to get the last word in, and then we try to get the last word, and we're not listening to each other.
Right.
So
yeah,
that wasn't as specific as what you quickly came up with, because I said.
Well, we're in the heat of it, so I can come up with a lot of examples really quickly.
Yeah.
Definitely in the heat of struggling with technology and social media and safety and all those things. We'll do that another day as well. But again, to tie this back to the beginning, I love that idea of the mindset shift, for example, from my child's giving me a hard time to why is my child having such a hard time? What's the lagging skill? And what I hear you saying right now is another mindset shift of we aren't just trying to solve the moment, because we already know there will be so many more moments, either on the same topic or another variation on a different topic. So we're really trying to set the relationship up differently and better so that the future moments are easier. And I think if parents can think about that, a lot of this will make more sense. Any last words of wisdom for parents struggling in this area that we haven't touched on yet? And maybe you've said it all. I just want to give you one more shot.
I mean, it's not easy for sure. And I think a lot of parents, we tend to criticize ourselves and, judge ourselves. We have so many opportunities, like you said. And so we mess up, quote unquote, mess up on one. Don't worry about it. Let it go. You snap at your child, you say something you regret, let it go, because you're going to have another opportunity. And so on that one, you just do differently, and just, really taking that time. So that's like one thing, is don't get hung up on just the one experience. Just refocus, wipe the slate clean, and even tell that to your kid, let's wipe the slate clean and start over. Yeah. I want to do this differently.
And let's say you're in that tit for tat. That's a good moment to say, like, you know what? This isn't feeling like we're on the same, like, hey, we're on the same team. Let's start over. If you find yourself getting stuck in that sort of back and forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Maria, let's take off your professional hat, put your personal one on. We won't compare this to the last episode to see if you give the same answer. What is one thing that you've either learned on your own personal parenting journey or from helping so many other parents that you just really want people to hear today that we have not said yet?
I don't know. I mean, you said take off my professional hat and put, like, they're both on all the time. And like this recent experience last night of talking to my kids about this social media was so hard. And all I kept thinking about is, this is what my parents, as in the parents that I work with, are dealing with all the time. I know this is hard. Like, yes, I have this background of knowledge and experience of working in all of this, but I'm a real mom. Yeah. And like,
and I think that's a misconception people have. Like, oh, you know so much, you can pull these tools out. But when it's your own kid and you're emotionally invested and you're tired and you've supported other people all day long and give, I almost think sometimes our knowledge is not a benefit.
No, I can tell you how many times I can't.
And then we beat ourselves up.
One of the philosophies with collaborative problem solving is kids do well if they can.
Yes.
And in certain meltdowns with my kids, that has been such a difficult philosophy to really hang on to. That, kids do well if they can, and it's about skill, not will. Those are hard things to believe. But let me tell you, the minute you can calm down and reconnect with that, it really does make a difference. Yeah. And so that's, it's just a real thing for me. Even with all my knowledge, I get stuck sometimes thinking, she's doing this on purpose. Like, she knows that all of those things. And so this is not easy. That said, for us, parents do well if they can. And so we need to go easy on ourselves, not easy, but like give ourselves some understanding and some compassion, and know that the work that we do is also like building a muscle. And the more we practice and we stay consistent, we will build that muscle. And we can't expect more without that practice.
Beautiful. I love that. I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining me again. I will let parents know how they can find you and reach out in the description. Parents, professionals, I'll be back soon with more stuff that I and others wish that we knew sooner. In the meantime, I'll leave you with a short list of stuff I've learned the hardest way. It ties in well to what we were talking about today. Number one, we aren't meant to do this parenting gig alone. So accept help when it's offered, ask for it when it isn't, whether that's a friend, family member, or a professional like yourself, Maria. There are people that can help with whatever we're struggling with. 2, you can't pour from an empty cup. So make sure that you are scheduling ways to refill yours every day. And 3, there isn't any way to be a perfect parent, but there are so many, many ways to be a really good one, or like you said, to do differently next time. So give yourself some grace and keep working on being a good parent, not a perfect parent. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I will be back soon.